So Kyle, I'm going to pass it over to you just to sort of, give your background for anyone who's new to you or has been following you, but maybe doesn't kind of know a lot about what you're up to. And then I'd love to just dive straight into some things you're thinking about and start to open the conversation there.
Yeah, sounds great. Hi, everyone. See some familiar faces on here. I'm a partner at OpenView. OpenView is a VC firm investing in B2B software companies, companies like Calendly, Expensify, User Testing, Datadog. And my colleague Blake Bartlett at OpenView actually coined the term product-led growth back in 2016. That was the year I joined OpenView. And since then, I've been working around helping build the community around PLG, document PLG best practices, and drive product-led growth strategies and tactics within our portfolio companies. So have gotten to see a lot of different kind of models out there, and also see things that work, things that don't work as well, and excited to chat about those best practices in this group. And in terms of what Bree said, I'm happy to just sort of go with what's top of mind for folks. I have to say, one of the things that I've been thinking about lately with one of our portfolio companies is there a role for outbound in a PLG motion? I see Mara on here who posted about that as well. And what's the right way of leveraging outbound, and whether it's going outbound into like PQLs or accounts where there's been someone who signed up for the product. And the idea of doing pure outbound, is that totally anathema to PLG, or can that actually be paired in a successful way?
I'll hop in quickly. The topic, Kyle, I love that that's where you started, because that really tees it up for us here at Correlated. We're seeing a lot of companies that we talk to, and hi, I'm Tim. Many of you, CEO and co-founder at Correlated. So a lot of the companies we're talking to that have a PLG model, as you said, Kyle, have traditionally not, done, pure outbound in the sort of more classical sense. But I do think what we're starting to see is, as you move past that sort of organic flywheel of self-serve and kind of more of the hand raisers, or sort of natural land and expand, there is an interest on many of these companies to try and find ways to get more via maybe more sales tactics. And one of the ways that we're helping many companies is finding playbooks there that work, and we're seeing it work. So I'd love to hear, Kyle, we're seeing it, but I'd love to hear what you're seeing. And yeah, anything that's worked particularly well for the OpenView portfolio, or kind of any tactics or strategies you're going to share.
Yeah, I guess one, so on the PQL side, there's obviously a group of people that are going to be like inbound PQLs. They're raising their hand, they're proactively wanting to talk to you. It's also a group that, they are ready to buy and they have the authority to buy. The user is essentially the buyer, or is very influential in the buying process. But then you've got companies where your user is just not in a position to ever be the person who makes the purchase, but loves your product and is kind of happy to help. And so one of the things I've seen folks do is they'll try to document the use case. So get on the phone with that user, or the biggest power users in an account, document the use case, try to encourage those folks to create some group value or expand the product to a team use case. So kind of go bottom up, but also take all of the learnings from working with those individuals, and then go top down and reach out to the relevant executives with a message of kind of like, hey, did you know you've got 10 folks on your team using the product? Would love to help you understand how folks are taking advantage of this and what the value they're seeing is, and using that as a kind of interesting message to unlock opportunities to have much bigger deals. It's obviously a risk of it backfiring, where all of a sudden someone realizes that people on their team are using a product that wasn't sanctioned by IT or procurement. But I think more often than not, folks recognize that individuals within their companies are going to use the products that make them most productive, and so aren't going to try to shut down the usage, but are really going to be intrigued by it and thinking about ways to scale up those efforts if something's working for someone at a bottom-up level. And then on the pure outbound side, I mean, that's something that I suspect there was a lot of interest around it, like as the markets were really frothy and as valuations have been high, growth was rewarded at all costs. So my take is I think that's going to be, ambitions are going to be scaled back in the next 6 months or so, because it takes a while for cold outbound efforts to see real results. It takes, a long time to get folks even interested. Conversion rate, once you get someone, to become a lead, to conversion is maybe as low as like 2 to 4% in a cold outbound model versus more of like 10% plus in a PQL model. And so I suspect that's going to be a lot less frequent these days. But I think what's fascinating about that opportunity around going outbound in a cold way is that you can really target folks that you see as in your ICP, which you learn from, working closely with folks from a self-service basis. You can be really targeted. You can also test different messaging with that persona to understand how to build more into an enterprise use case or how to talk to your enterprise customers. There's a lot of data that you can collect in that outbound motion that can be helpful for the business. So I guess I'll see. I suspect folks will start to kick the tires in the next 6 months here, but not totally lean into it.
So one of the questions that we got in here from Jake is, I think, a common question, because in product-led companies you get a lot of personal email signups. So Jake, I don't know if you want to ask your question quickly, or else I can do kind of a quick recap here.
Go for it.
Okay. So you said we have a 14-day free trial. Around 90% of these trials are not companies. So is it worth making the free trial only accessible through a business email, or would you recommend keeping it open to the personal email? I have my opinions here, but I'd love to hear yours, Kyle.
It is really tricky. In the developer space, I don't know if your product's a developer-oriented product or not, but if it is, I see a lot of dark funnels where folks sign up with a personal account. They might also want to test something on a personal device before bringing it into like a business context, especially if there's like sensitive data or company-wide change management. So I guess a few reactions. Like one is, if you're getting that many folks signing up with a personal account, are you paying for the sign up? Like, are you paying for that lead, or are they coming inbound in a more organic way? If you're paying for the lead, there are tools that you can use like metadata.io that will actually give you insight into who that account is. And so you might be able to get the best of both worlds and get a lot more visibility into that dark funnel without requiring a behavior change from your user's perspective. Then I personally think, in a PLG motion, the goal is to lead with value. And then sort of gain the permission to go deeper with that account. And so I'm hesitant to require a business email only from a customer, but you might want to start looking into things like really expanding on the messaging on your homepage and thinking about, onboarding in your product experience is happening before someone signs up. Like you might be getting a lot of Gmails because people are either low intent or they just aren't super educated around your product when they sign up. And so you can actually, by building out your site and getting people more educated before they sign up, you can convince them to trust you with their corporate email and just be more serious before they ultimately sign up for the product. I guess it's not necessarily one size fits all answer, but those were just the immediate reactions I have.
Okay, sweet, thank you.
All right, I'm seeing one here. So credit card wall. Okay, if we're building a product for a developer to be integrated into their application, do we think about nudging them in the journey or leave them alone? If nudging, should we nudge with a call or human email touch, trying to balance not bothering the user, but still getting them to use the product?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think if you're seeing a lot of folks not move forward to the next step, I guess the way that Christopher Miller at HubSpot frames it, he has what he calls his 3D framework. And the 3Ds are discoverability, desirability, and doability. So I'd start there before trying to expand into additional touch points. So it's, easiest problem to solve is that discoverability problem. Like, is it just not clear what is supposed to be done? And how can you surface up in the UI that is the next step that you want someone to take, by either simplifying the user experience, adding guides, adding checklists, just sort of really making it obvious what to do next. Once that problem is solved, it's about desirability, helping folks understand like why they should take that next step and what results they're going to see. Some folks will include like dummy data, for example, to show folks what the end state looks like, kind of play forward the story, which makes you kind of want to see what that end state looks like for your own business. And so I think that, showing more, value and what's the outcome going to look like encourages people to take that step. And the follow one is just doability. So people know what they're supposed to be doing, know why to do it, but it's just really hard to do. It takes a long time. There's friction points. And that's a lot harder to optimize. It tends to require real product work. But if it's a doability problem, that's actually where your sales team can be really helpful. And so, for example, at Deputy, which is one of our portfolio companies in the workforce management space, one of the things that they want to do is have you set up your employee schedule on Deputy. Now, you might have your schedule in Excel, it might be a pen and paper right now. Some folks are just not going to be in a position to really easily set up their schedule within Deputy, especially if it's a mid-size account. And so one of their touch points is, hey, send us your schedule. We'll set it up in your behalf and then walk you through the setup, fully set up version of the product. And I think those are a great way to add human touch points to improve the customer experience.
So there's been a lot of talk, even more so than before, all around product-led growth in the last year or so. I'm curious if there have been shifts in the companies that you're working with, maybe in their strategy, or things that are more top of mind than maybe they were in the past over the last maybe 6 months or something like that.
Changes around PLG. Well, for folks who haven't seen, we did write a piece recently called "The New Era for PLG." So I'll put that in the chat here. Do encourage folks to check that out because it literally is the long version of that topic. But I guess one of the things that we've realized is that we're in just a different era in terms of how folks are adopting products. Software is so mission critical for businesses, and they tend to have dozens, if not hundreds, of software products. And it's really challenging for people to keep track of all those tools. And a lot of times there's just fear of adding additional tools to that tool stack that just adds sprawl. And so we're seeing more companies try to embed their products within a user's existing workflow and be discoverable in a user's context, rather than being seen as like a destination that someone has to log into. So whether it's like Chrome extension products like Toucan, which is a really interesting one, building on marketplaces and app stores, or there's a lot of different varieties for building API first products. That's been a major trend around PLG. And what I think is so great about that, Chrome extensions, for example, literally any website that you're on, you could be using a product with. And so if you're downloading a Grammarly, it works anywhere where you're writing. And so I think that in PLG, we're always thinking about how to drive active use of our products. Well, if the product is integrated into the place where you're already using the product, using another product 24/7, that's like the ideal thing. You're just constantly working for your users. Another thing that's been coming up lately is just, I'm seeing a lot of challenges around like the product-led organization. And as folks think about like product-led, they're often, their minds go to like product management-led. And thinking through what's the responsibility of the product team versus maybe a growth team versus marketing versus like go-to-market orgs and RevOps. That challenge is something that literally every company I talk to is debating. It's like, do we have different owners for self-serve versus enterprise sales? Or does that actually create tension between the self-serve funnel and the enterprise funnel? Is marketing gold on revenue? Is marketing gold on signups, on leads, on activated signups? And so that's something where there's, again, unfortunately not like a one-size-fits-all answer, but some common challenges that folks run up against. And I think it's just it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out over the next 6 to 12 months, because I think we'll get a lot more clarity around what does a best practice organization look like around PLG.
Awesome. And I see Prakash has a question. Happy to ask you live.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry, I hit enter a little bit too soon. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And Ryan, thanks for the invite from earlier. We're a no-code developer tool, Zano.com. We've been largely seeing growth from self-serve for a while, but we're a very small team. So I have two questions. One is around the first hire we should be making to really look through where there's signal. Because like right now, there's a lot of, sometimes I guess they're called hand raisers that are like, hey, we've been using your tool. We're part of this larger enterprise company. We want to be more proactive about that. So who would you recommend the first hire be? And then the second thing is really around more tactically the technical stack. Like we do have Segment and Mixpanel, but we don't really have anything that enriches the data to tell us whether it's someone we should be pursuing. So those two questions, please.
Yeah, great question. So what I tend to find in at least in our portfolio is that the first hire for these kinds of challenges is a head of growth or like a growth product person. And the way that they should think of their role is to be the most data-driven person in terms of understanding the funnel and understanding where there's friction points, and then focusing their time and their team's time around proving out ways to reduce that friction and improve conversion in different steps. And then they tend to hand off that work to other teams to own in the long run. And so when it comes to this kind of PQL, like where should we be focusing our go-to-market resources, who's most likely to convert, I would say the growth team should run a lot of that initial analysis and experimentation. And then probably the long-term owner is going to be RevOps, especially when you're trying to manage PQLs at scale across like potentially a relatively large and segmented go-to-market team. That's my suggestion, to start with the head of growth, have this be one of their initial kind of focal points, and then as there's enough demand, enough PQLs, bring in a dedicated RevOps function. And then on the question around data, so Clearbit is pretty common. There's other data enrichment tools as well, but folks will often take data in terms of signups and append Clearbit information, or depending on tooling available. I suspect that like in the product-led sales tech stack, this is going to be just that those kinds of like data enrichment opportunities are going to be more automated within the context of those platforms. But you can start with Clearbit, which is an API-driven enrichment solution. Clearbit can also tell you things like, hey, let's reveal the folks that are visiting our pricing page but actually don't even sign up for a free account, because these might be enterprise domains that are actually evaluating projects, and it's actually good to be aware of these accounts. But yeah, so Clearbit, and then can you remind me, Prakash, the rest of that question around the PLG data piece?
No, that was largely it. I think where we are right now is, we've been collecting behavioral events through Segment and piping into Mixpanel, and like Intercom is like our source of truth right now. But it's very hard for us to identify who we should be going after, and maybe like those attributes that really kind of lead to the sales assisted product motion. And I think our tooling is a little off. So I just like Clearbit, that's great. I'd gotten that recommendation. And anything else that you can think of that is part of like the PLG tech stack, I'd love to hear.
Got it. Yeah. So just other thoughts for you. There's the data component and like automating the process around who to reach out to. And so you could run a big data science project and say, hey, these are all the leading indicators or all the signals. I suspect though that like if you were to just re-architect like the journey that your top 10, folks that started off self-serve and are now, decent customers, like I suspect you could go talk to them about the journey from their perspective, or just go audit the data that you have from them and start to develop hypotheses around these different kind of PQL triggers or leading indicators. And I tend to find that works almost as well as the really data-driven approach, because a lot of the PQL triggers are really just things that are confirming hypotheses that you probably already had. So it's like accounts above a certain size where there's really going to be enough business need and enough budget to make some sort of proactive sales motion worthwhile, taking certain actions in the product that are indicating a high intent. And so that's different for every product, but you don't necessarily need to go down to like the nth degree. It can even be showing initial intent. And if you take hey, this is an account in our ICP above a certain size, taking certain actions in the product, that's probably like a good starting point to then iterate on.
Awesome. Really appreciate that.
I see a couple other questions in the chat here as well, so feel free to speak up and ask those. Let's see, Ashu, maybe Walter, Pete. Okay, go ahead. I see a hand raised.
Cool. Yeah, thanks so much for your time, Kyle. I'm just wondering, like, it's probably a very vague question, but how do you start thinking about like the land and expand motion where you have people coming into a product, just buying a couple of number of seats? I know there are two main ways to go through land and expand: is increasing seat usage or moving across different teams within a company to adopt the product. So how do you start thinking about like how to implement that?
Yeah, how to implement the expand of a land and expand motion?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, great question. So the first thing I think about is like reducing friction that really gets in the way of folks using the product as a team or enterprise-wide use case. When I see PLG products that get stuck in single player mode that have maybe 1 or 2 users in an account, they have the economic model of like B2C businesses, so relatively high churn, maybe only 40 to 60% retention rates, and limited expansion potential, and also like more price sensitivity, given that these are products that folks normally buy on a personal credit card. So I do think you want to go from the 1 or 2 seats to like team to like larger opportunities like as quickly as you can. And so one of the things is really just allowing folks in to be that free option, free trial, instead of saying, hey, our free version is a single player mode only product, and in order to upgrade into a team plan, you have to buy our paid versions. Like, I'd love to see more folks have multi-user free or free trial products, so that you set the expectation that people can use the product as a collaborative product from early on. I think Miro is a good example. Their free version, I believe, is unlimited users and has a limit of 3 active boards, I believe is what it is. So they really try to get more and more people in an account using Miro. Or Slack lets unlimited people use their free version, but then once you run into their 10,000 message limit, that's when you need to convert from free to paid. And so you can even look at like certain paid packages. Many companies will have a minimum where they'll say, hey, this is $15 a user, minimum of 3 users, minimum of 2 users. The next thing that's kind of harder to do is just building more collaboration and virality into your product. I have some suggestions around that. I wrote a piece about that recently. I'll put that in the chat for folks who are curious. But the goal is to help educate people about why it works better in multiplayer mode than single player mode, and then build the right nudges in the product in order to quickly move into that multiplayer use case. But those would be the key things. There's some things you can do from a go-to-market and sales perspective. But if you're looking for where to start, I definitely start with removing that friction that gets people from using the product in collaborative mode in the first place, and limiting the and having a product that's not well suited for in-product collaboration and virality.
No, yeah, that's a really good point. That makes sense. Thanks.
All right, I know we're coming up on time, but Mike, why don't you ask your question quickly?
Cool. Thanks, Breezy. Hey guys, so just curious, Kyle, I've got a company that I work for that we have an engineering tool basically for building mechanical engineering products, right? So geometry, CAD-like tool. We tried a PLG motion like right before I joined the company, and we didn't have the right tech stack, right visibility, right data tools to do it, and there was a lot of backlash. So I think we've, in the last 6 months, we've developed the right pipelines, right data pipelines and analytics tools to actually get that visibility. But now the biggest problem I think we have is internal buy-in from the go-to-market team. So I'm curious, like the top 2 or 3 things that would be worth doing now that we have like Amplitude in place and we can do the tracking, like what would be the next steps in your approximation to securing internal buy-in?
Yeah, so I would focus on identifying like where they're like company-wide KPIs that the sales team or go-to-market team is focused on improving, to find ways to have the PLG motion help support their ultimate goals. So it might be, hey, churn is high, or we're really nervous about churn because of the potential economic downturn, and we don't have a whole lot of visibility into who's most likely to churn. Well, then what you do is you probably look at your product analytics data to say, hey, where are there accounts where usage has been trending down, or we're showing signals that that they actually are at risk, so that we can put customer success resources on those accounts to try to save them before they actually leave. Like that would be a great way of proving out value of PLG with what you've already done and getting people really excited about going deeper. But other options would be, hey, we're not getting enough lead generation. We have to go outbound. It's a time-consuming process. There's very low conversion rates. We're seeing burnout with our SDR team, hard to retain them. If that's the challenge that folks are facing, then you could start to think about ways to use your product as a marketing channel and essentially get people to be able to try before they buy and open up that funnel. And so that's the biggest place I'd start is if you can tie it to a big company-wide and go-to-market-wide initiative, people are going to be much more excited about partnering with you on this journey because this is going to actually be benefiting them.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much. I know we're 1 minute over, but Kyle, really appreciate all the insights. We do have a Slack group going as well. So if anyone else wants to join that, we can answer some questions there and continue the conversation there on LinkedIn. So either works, and have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to see you all.
Thanks.